So we're going to be going through the 13 marker today for a bit of practice. As a quick reminder, so we know, don't we, that these obviously are always out of 13. There's one on each paper, so one on paper 1, one on paper 2. And the mark allocation's pretty even, so you get up to 6 marks for AO1, which is your knowledge and understanding, and up to 7 marks for AO3, which is your evaluation skill. And the essays really can be on a range of things. So I've picked a method style essay today, but it could be a debate. So, something like reductionism versus holism, nature versus nurture. Could be an issue, so something like validity, or it even could be an approach. So something like, I think we've had before, biological psychology gives us the best understanding of human behaviour. So there is quite a range it can be. So if we look at this question, so it says, use your knowledge and understanding from across the psychology course to explain how far you agree with the following viewpoint. And that kind of intro sentence is always very standard. That doesn't change. Then they'll give you a quote. So here it says, questionnaires are useful for researching people. And I've highlighted questionnaires there because I'd suggest that's what you do in the exam. So you highlight, what is this quote actually asking me about? Here, it's questionnaires. That's what this question is about. In your response, refer to the use of questionnaires in so Braun et al. 2002 study into reconstructive memory. Again, I've highlighted that because that's what the question is telling me I have to talk about. So I have to talk about that study. And at least one other study which has used questionnaires. So I've been given another rule there. I need to use at least one other study, which is typical. But this is said which has used questionnaires. Sometimes they leave that open. So you could, in other questions, maybe contrast a questionnaire with an observation that you might be arguing is better for whatever reason. But you can't here. It has to be another questionnaire. And as a quick reminder, that other questionnaire study that we pick has to be in a different topic, basically. So at the top it says, doesn't it, from across the psychology course. So because Braun is within memory, your second study has to be not from memory. So it can be from crime, development, psychological problems, sleep and dreaming, or social influence, just not from memory. Otherwise you'll get capped at 4 out of 13. Doesn't matter how brilliant your essay is. So the structure we tend to use, so you'd always start with an introduction to define and show knowledge of questionnaires. So things like, what are they? So they're a written form of self-report. They can be open or closed, and you could explain what that meant. Within closed, you've got different types of closed questions, like rating scale questions, like so like strongly agree, strongly disagree, like simple yes, no questions, or like multiple choice questions. So show that knowledge of whatever the question is about first. You then, obviously, this study want to describe Braun's study. So features like the aim, the method, definitely. I'll come back to that in a second. The design, the procedure, results and conclusion. And you must have a particular focus here on how questionnaires were used, as this is the focus of the essay question. I'll come back to this in a second on our next slide to show you how this can be done well, or how actually a student might describe Braun's study, but they're not emphasising the use of the questionnaire, so really would kind of miss the point of this question. You'll then evaluate, so don't forget your evaluation needs to relate to questionnaires for this question. So it can't just be a generic Braun evaluation. Again, I've got an example in a second, and it has to be in context. You'll then describe another study, and this time we've been given the rule that also uses questionnaires. So things from you could go for Cooper and Mackey had an element of questionnaires. I imagine Tandock will be a popular one to bring in there. I imagine Blackwell with the motivational questionnaire to assess mindset might be another popular one. There's lots of different ones that we can use as long as it's a questionnaire that is used. Okay. Don't forget, obviously, it must be from another topic area. Evaluate again, so same advice as above, but make new points. If you've already said above, maybe that questionnaires can be kept ethical quite easily because they're very easy to keep anonymous. Perhaps you've said something about that. Don't reuse that same evaluation again. Go to something different, you know, talking about maybe social desirability and people maybe lying in questionnaires. So try to use different points. Then you'll conclude. So link back to the quote. Are questionnaires useful for researching people? So given your answer and the things that you will have discussed, things that you will have evaluated, do you think they are and why? Or do you think they're not and why? Or do you think it would maybe depend on what you were actually researching, and elaborate on that bit? Okay, so I thought I'd show you some kind of bad and good examples of how to do this. So if we look at this first description of Braun, if I read this to you, or you can pause it and you can read it yourself. So Braun aimed to see if autobiographical advertising can directly affect how participants remember a prior childhood event. They used 107 students from Midwestern University in the USA to test this. Firstly, participants were brought into the lab and asked about childhood events. They then viewed either a Disney, which was autobiographical, or non-Disney, non-autobiographical advert, and asked to picture themselves in the advert as they watched. Participants were only in one of the advert conditions. This is independent measures. The researchers then lied and told their original answers on the childhood memories had been lost and could they redo these. Results found that those who viewed the autobiographical advert increased their confidence of childhood events more than the non-autobiographical group. This shows autobiographical adverts can reconstruct memory. Now, what do you think to that? So actually the knowledge of the study is good, isn't it? It's got lots of nice details in there, but it really is not addressing this question. Although they have described Braun, they've really not mentioned in there the use of questionnaires at all. I've made this quite an extreme version. But even if they'd said, you know, the word questionnaire once in there, they're still really not addressing the use of questionnaires in this study. So it really lacks focus on the question. So would only gain quite low marks really there. So should we see a good version? And it's not that much longer. And I've put in bold all the places that the use of questionnaires has been made. So therefore it is going to be relevant. So it's very similar with some obviously additions. So Braun aimed to see if autobiographical advertising can affect how participants remember a prior childhood event. So they collected data with a closed questionnaire showing that knowledge, and it was called the Life Events Inventory. This questionnaire had one target question which asked participants to rate on a scale of 0, definitely did not happen, to 100, definitely did happen, numerous childhood events. The target event appeared fourth on the list and was met and shook hands with a favourite TV character at a theme resort. So you can see loads of things about the questionnaire there. A week later they viewed either a Disney advert, autobiographical, or non-Disney advert, non-autobiographical, and were asked to picture themselves in the advert as they watched. The researchers then lied and told them that their questionnaire had been lost and could they redo this. Results found that those who viewed the autobiographical advert increased in their self-rated confidence of the childhood event having happened more than those in the non-autobiographical group. This shows autobiographical adverts can reconstruct memory. So you see that difference there, and it would be the same advice with the second study that you brought in. So say if you did do Tandoc second, you'd be talking through obviously what the study was about, Facebook use, envy, depression, but that how those 3 variables were measured via our online questionnaire, give examples of questions that were used, so things like I generally feel inferior to others for envy. So you'd really be emphasising the use of that questionnaire. So you can see as you're looking at your screen, on your left hand side you've got a bad version, and on your right hand side you've got a good version. So now let's have a quick look at evaluation and what to do and what not to do. So if we look at this first one, a weakness of Braun's study is that it used independent measures design. This means that the results may be due to individual differences which can reduce the internal validity of results. For example, maybe the group who watched the Disney advert were just more naturally suggestible people, so their memories were easily changed regardless of the advert type. Now, hopefully you've realised here, so this wouldn't gain any credit as the evaluation is not relevant to the question. So it's not about questionnaires, which is what this 13 marker is about. And we often see students write these evaluation points in the essay. This student really knows what they're talking about, don't they? They understand independent measures design, they understand a weakness of it. If this was a 3 marker or 2 marker that just said give a weakness of Braun's study, this would be a lovely response. Or if it said give a weakness of independent measures design specifically, again, great response. But it's got nothing to do with this essay because it's not about questionnaires. So don't do this. Don't do this generic just study evaluation in the essay. If we have a look at the second one, it looks quite short, doesn't it? So you probably have got that as a criticism already. So yeah, it's not really elaborated. But again, if we read, so a bad thing about questionnaires is that people may lie and give socially desirable answers. This means that the data gathered may be invalid. So it's relevant to the question this time of questionnaires, so it would gain some credit, but it's got no context and it's not particularly well expanded. So this needs to be explained further. Yeah, it does say social desirability, people might lie, but it's not really unpacking why they might lie and what social desirability is. So we want to appear more normal, we want to avoid embarrassment. I don't think this one particularly pairs well with Braun, but this could be one that you pair really well with your second study depending what you bring in. So Tandoc, I think, would be a popular second study to bring in here. And socially desirable answers link really well with that. Despite it being anonymous, people might still not really want to fully admit on that questionnaire the levels of envy that they feel or depression. They might feel that that's something quite personal and quite sensitive towards them. So yeah, I would personally pair this with not Braun, but your second study, and making sure that it's got context, because this one doesn't, and explaining it a little bit further as well. So this one is an example of one that's been done well. So a strength of closed questionnaires is that they produce quantitative data. Don't stop there, because that's not a strength yet, is it? That's just a fact. So which is easy to analyse. That now makes it a strength. For example, in Braun's study, they could easily compare the ratings out of 100 on the target question at time 1 and then time 2 to see if the confidence in this childhood memory had changed. This is not only easy but objective, which means a factual thing. So is a strength of specifically closed questionnaires. So this is what you should aim for. It's relevant to the question. It's also said that you're talking about closed questionnaires. You've not said questionnaires in general produce quantitative data, because that's not true. But when they are closed, they do. It's in context of Braun and it's explained and expanded really well. So that's what you want to aim for. Okay. So going back to that first slide, just remembering this structure. So remembering showing some knowledge in the introduction. Some people just rewrite the quote in the introduction, but you want to show some knowledge, so get some AO1 points in there already by defining whatever the question's about. Describing the study, or obviously it could be a theory in a different question, making sure you pick out relevant parts and do that with accuracy, clarity. Evaluation that has to be relevant to the question that you're being asked. Describing then another, obviously in this case study, but it could be a theory in a different question from another topic. Evaluating again, trying to make different evaluation points. And you could, you might aim for 4 evaluation total. So 2 for the first set of evaluation, 2 different ones for the second set. But if you can't always get that many, you can do less and still get marks that could get you up to top band, as long as you're explaining those evaluations and they're in context. And then lastly, conclude, link back to the quote, are in this case questionnaires useful for researching people? Okay, hopefully you found that useful. If you did want to have a go at writing this essay, that could be some really great practice in time for the mock. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Bye.